Alexis Korner, you're the father of English blues. Or reputed to be such. How did that start?
I suppose it started by virtue of the fact that I was the oldest cat around who was prepared to say that that was what he was playing.
About what period did you start?
Playing blues, 1940.
1940?
Yeah, I know you weren't born then.
Where did you start and how were you received when you
Oh,
began?
well, it wasn't a question of being received at that time. 1940, I started by nicking some 78s from Shepherd's Bush Market. And amongst them was Jimmy Yancey's 5 O'Clock Blues and Mellow Blues. And I had been brought up playing piano. I was a reluctant pianist, but you know, I did play piano, and I just got completely turned on by Yancey.
Were you playing classical piano
Yes.
at that stage?
Yes, indeed I was. And not with any particular pleasure. I liked music, sure, it was fine. I'd always had music around, but it wasn't the sun and the stars and the moon. And then it was.
All the other blues players you listened to were American Negro. Is that
Yeah, there was, with the exception of some jazz records and the occasional jazz band which did play a blues. I mean, you had bands like the Bob Crosby Band and people like that who deliberately played the blues. But we're talking about jazz blues and not country blues or boogie woogie. There were nothing but black records. And there weren't any white records. And I mean, I didn't think about it at the time. It was just the way the music sounded, you know, and it was all black players.
How did you get blues off the air in England?
I don't know. It was just a matter of, you started off, I had one friend who collected records. We didn't like each other really, but we both had the same trouble, which was that we liked jazz and blues, and our parents didn't, and nobody else we knew did. So we became friends, you know, one of those situations. And you progressed from that to 2 people and 3 people and so on and so forth. And I mean, you played in living rooms or back rooms, but I mean, only when there wasn't anyone there but you and whoever you were playing with, because there was no question of playing it in front of anyone else. I mean, it was, well, it's just no one had thought of it.
When did the first blues clubs start in England?
I suppose the first blues clubs didn't start in England until the 50s, the early 50s. You see, the first major blues performer in the areas of music of which we're talking about to work in England was Bill Brunsey, who came over in 1951 and did 3 or 4 concerts, a couple of which were absolutely hysterical, I might add. They were superbly funny, as well as being very fine music. In fact, Bill Brunsey on one concert was landed with a piano player who complained that he was playing 13 bars and not 12 bars. And there was this enormous row on stage between Roy Sturgis and Bill Brunsey, which ended up with Bill saying to Roy Sturgis, there's no such thing as a 12-bar blues. There's no proper blues that isn't 11 or 13 or 14 or 15, you see. And Roy saying, no, man, if it's not 12 bars, it's not right. And we've got these ridiculous things going. It was very funny early days, very funny indeed. And it progressed from there, you know.
A little bit about the marquee. There seemed to be a lot of
The proper one,
names.
you mean? Not the present day one, but the one before.
Oh, definitely the proper
The
one.
Oxford
The,
Street,
the
yeah.
one at 100 Oxford Street, which is now a downstairs cinema. It's the Academy Cinema, which used to be just on the ground floor, and we had the basement. It was just a very good club. It had a tremendous atmosphere. Working conditions were good for club conditions at that time, although since, you know, they weren't very much into ventilation. If it was full after half an hour, I mean, the condensation was running down all the mirrors and you couldn't see anything, and every time you brushed against a wall you were dripping wet, and it was hard to stay in tune, but the atmosphere and the excitement involved was absolutely amazing. Tremendous atmosphere. People would stand up on tables and shout, and they don't do that now. They sit on stools and shout.
Dustin, did you start in the marquee too?
No, I didn't. I remember going to the Marquee just to watch people play. And the first people to ever play amplified blues was Alexis's group there at the Marquee. I remember they had a big old Ampeg amplifier, sort of three-cornered one with speakers that pointed out that way and that way. And when people used to go down to watch them play acoustically at first, and then when they started trundling in with this amp one day, I remember lots of people going out of the door and not wanting to see it because they didn't consider the blues could be electric. It had to be country, you know? And there was a lot of stigma and silliness going on in those days. And fortunately, I think people have grown up to the extent that they'll listen to blues played on any sort of setup that a fella feels he can do it honestly on now, you know, which is a good thing, I think. It's hopeful.
So you more or less introduced electric blues.
Yes, a point which was made by Duster. I'd never thought of it. We used to get slung out of clubs, you see. We ran our own club over a pub in Wardour Street. The pub was called the Roundhouse, which has caused some confusion later in histories because of the Roundhouse and the Roundhouse, but this is not the Roundhouse that everyone plays at now. This was a pub. Sonny and Brownie used to come up there on Thursday nights when they weren't working elsewhere and play there, and Bill Brunsey played there. Everyone played there for a bottle of whiskey or nothing, right? We all did. It was, well, the landlord complained because we wanted to play electric as well as acoustic, and we had a couple of gigs in other clubs, which traditional jazz clubs, basically, where this friend of mine, Cyril Davis, who was a harmonica player, and a very fine 12-string guitar player and singer, and I used to play occasionally, because once we played electric, they wouldn't let us into the clubs. They said, no, we're not having this sort of nastiness in here. You either play acoustic or you're not playing in our club. And so we decided, well, since the pub wouldn't let us play there and none of the other clubs would, we'd better start our own club where we could play electric. So we did.
And what was that club?
That was a place, a little drinking club in West London, in Ealing, called the Ealing Club. It was just opposite the heaviest Irish punch-up club in the district. And we opened on St. Patrick's night, would you believe? We were so dumb we hadn't even worked out it was St. Patrick's night.
Yeah.
Blues Incorporated was...
That's the name of the band, yes.
About that period.
Yes, it was indeed.
And when did you put out one album?
The first recording that we ever put out with the name of Blues Incorporated was about 1957, because we got a contract with Decca to produce some skiffle things for them, and I said, but we're not a skiffle band, man. And they said, oh, but everyone who's successful now is a skiffle band. So I said, well, I'm sorry, we're not a skiffle band. So he said, but you've got to be a skiffle band. So we had an argument, and we agreed finally that the first EP would come out under the name Skiffle and the second EP wouldn't. So the second EP came out under the name of Blues Incorporated, and that was the first time we used the name. And that was about 1957. It was meant to be anonymous as a name.